I'd like to welcome Dr. Reigeluth again and give him the stage to listen his lecture on learning theories and instructional theories. Thank you, Dr. Reigeluth.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'll be talking about learning theories and instructional theories. And what's the difference between the two? Well, learning theories are descriptive. They address how learning takes place. And there are three major categories of learning theories that you're probably pretty well familiar with. There are two kinds of behavioral theories. Again, you're probably familiar with both of those. And there are three major kinds of cognitive theories. And finally, three major kinds of constructivist theories. But I'd like to emphasize that this is not all the learning theories that there are. There are many, many different kinds and subkinds of learning theories. Instructional theories, in contrast, they are prescriptive about how to help learning take place rather than how learning takes place. And there's a big difference between those two. Instructional theories are made up of two major parts, methods and situations. Methods, of course, are what we use to help people learn. And the situations are indications about when to use each of those methods. The methods have a number of characteristics. One of them is the scope of the method, that is the amount of instruction that it includes on a continuum from macro to micro. The generality of a method includes the breadth of situations in which it can be used, and that ranges from universal to local. Precision of the method is the level of detail of description of the method, from highly precise description to a very vague description of the method. The power of a method is the amount that that method contributes to the outcomes. And that's usually measured by a probability that ranges from 0 to 1. And finally, the consistency of a method is the reliability of the effect that it has on outcomes, ranging from high to low. Now, regarding situations, that is information about when to use each of the different methods, there are two major aspects of the situations. One of them is values, the other is conditions. The values can be about several different things. The values about the learning goals influence primarily what to teach. Values about priorities concern the effectiveness, efficiency, and enjoyability of the instruction. And there are usually trade-offs there, that if you want to have highly efficient instruction, generally it has to be less enjoyable. And so there are usually trade-offs there. The values about methods, people have different favorites for methods that aren't necessarily related to research. They're not necessarily proven to be better. It's more a matter of, I prefer this method. It's a personal preference. So for instance, some teachers prefer discovery methods to instruction, whereas others prefer expository methods. The final major category of values is values about power, and that concerns who has power in the instructional situation. Are the students empowered with self-directed or self-regulated learning, or does the teacher have all the power? And that also, your preference, your values about power are going to influence the methods that you would choose. Conditions is the other major kind of situational factor. And here the conditions include the nature of the content, that is, the nature of what is to be learned, the nature of the learner, the nature of the learning environment, and ID constraints. With respect to content, the nature of what is to be learned, I'll be talking a little more about this later. The nature of the learner, you're certainly familiar with learning styles, abstract versus concrete, or visual versus verbal, Gardner's multiple intelligences. There are a number of kinds of learner variables that might influence the methods that you use. The learning environment, is it going to be instruction solely over the internet, or is it going to be instruction in perhaps on-the-job training? Those two different, I'm getting a big echo all of a sudden.
You can continue, Dr. Reigeluth. I think you turned off your microphone. Somebody created the echo, but it wasn't you. So,
okay.
Now you're fine.
Okay, great, thanks. So I was saying the nature of the learning environment will influence the methods that you choose to some extent, whether it's internet-based learning or in the classroom or on-the-job training. ID constraints is also something that can influence the instructional methods you choose. If you have a very low budget, as most of us professors do for the courses that we teach, that severely constrains the methods that you can use in your instruction. So those various situations all are factors that influence your decision about what methods to use when. Why won't this advance? It's trying. Okay. So what is the relationship between theories of learning and instruction? Well, instructional theories can be developed from learning theories. That's one way that they're related, but instructional theories can also be developed from experience or from analogy. So these are deductive, inductive, and abductive approaches to developing instructional theories. For example, schema theory was used as a basis for developing the notion of advanced organizers. David Ausubel developed this instructional strategy or method called Advanced Organizer, and that was one of the foundations for development of the elaboration theory. Another example is information processing theory. Gagne used that to develop his 9 events of instruction. Regarding experience, feedback on practice has been developed largely through experience. There are various kinds of feedback on practice. You see 4 of them here. And those methods of providing feedback were all developed through basically trial and error, through experience. With respect to analogy, the zoom lens analogy was one of the powerful bases for developing the elaboration theory. Now, learning theories also provide a rationale for instructional theories, particularly those instructional theories that were developed through experience or analogy. Learning theories provide a rationale or understanding for why those particular methods work. The most important aspect of instructional theory is choosing methods. That's the whole purpose of instructional theory, to help designers choose methods of instruction. And as I've talked about already, that's based on situations, the values and the conditions. Of these, the most important is conditions. the content, the nature of what is to be learned has the most powerful impact on the methods of instruction that you ought to use. There are 4 major kinds of learning or categories of content that have, in my view, the biggest impact on selecting methods of instruction. When you're helping students to memorize information, you use very different instructional strategies from helping them to understand things, understand causal models or conceptual models. And the methods there are very different from the methods you use to help learners to apply skills, to learn how to apply skills. And still different is the affective domain, acting on attitudes and values. Methods of instruction are very different there. So the nature of the content, the nature of the kind of learning that you're trying to promote has the most powerful impact on your selection of instructional methods. Now, your professor asked me to make some comments about the relationship between the learning sciences and instructional design and technology, or instructional systems technology, as we call it at IU. First of all, I think the term learning sciences is a bit of a misnomer. Learning sciences is different from instructional sciences. We've talked about the distinction between learning and instruction. Learning is related to how people learn. Instruction is related to how to help people learn. And so learning science, is that just learning theory? From its name, you would think it would be. Instructional science deals with instructional theory, yet learning science seems to devote a lot of attention to instructional theory, instructional methods. So in that sense, the fact that it devotes a lot of attention to instructional theory makes it seem very similar to instructional design and technology, IDT. But in fact, you could view it as a subset of IDT because IDT devotes a lot of attention to guidance for the instructional design process. The ADDIE model is a fine example of that. Learning sciences don't address the instructional design process at all. And so in that sense, IDT is much broader. It deals with front-end analysis, guidance for front-end analysis. It deals with guidance for implementation and evaluation. Those other aspects of the ADDIE model are not really addressed by the learning sciences. Another distinction is philosophical bent. The learning sciences are dominated by people who have a very strong constructivist inclination, whereas instructional design and technology has people who are more eclectic in their viewpoint. They recognize that there is indeed a lot of value to what constructivism has to offer, but they also realize there's much value to what cognitivism and behaviorism have to offer. It's important for instructional designers to be pragmatic and to use instructional methods that come out of any of those philosophical traditions. Learning sciences at Indiana University. There were some professors at IU who were in the instructional systems technology department who split off to form a separate program in learning sciences. And that was due primarily, well, to some extent due to philosophical bent. The folks who left the IST department were ones who had pretty much an exclusive interest in constructivism, whereas those who remained were ones who maintained a more eclectic outlook. But the other factor that was involved in the separation was personality conflicts. And I think that was really the major reason that some folks left the IST department to form the Learning Sciences program. So with that, I'd like to open it to comments and questions. I wanted to save a lot of time to hear what your thoughts are and any questions you may have, and also put in a little plug here for my latest book. The copyright date is actually 2021, but the book became available in October. So this book talks a lot about instructional theory and the ID process and how the two need to be integrated. And it offers a holistic ID model for integrating those two. So with that, please, I'd love to hear your comments and questions.
Thank you so much.